Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. Happy to have you here. We're going to check in with Tressa Johnson, the Adult Services Librarian at one of the great folks at the Bainbridge branch of Kitsap Regional Library. And she is just back from a meeting of the American Library Association, and we'll learn all about what she learned about. But first, I want to thank Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island, which sponsors Something to Talk About. They are having a summer bash on Thursday, July 31st from 11 to 4. You can enjoy barbecue, games, beer, and wine, all while supporting Bainbridge Prepares. You can show your support for resilience here on Bainbridge Island by participating in the summer bash at Fieldstone. You'll also get a chance to check out Fieldstone Rolling Bay. To learn more, call 206-594-1010. And I'd like to acknowledge that we are living and meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Puget Sound Coast Salish, and specifically here on Bainbridge Island, the Suquamish, the people of the clear salt water, who have lived here since time immemorial, and they are helping us to learn to be better stewards of the place where we live and they live. Thank you, Tressa, for joining us. I am glad to see you back. Did you have a good trip?
I did. I had a great trip, and it's good to be back. Thanks for having me. Before I talk about the American Library Association, which is quite an experience, I want to touch on some questions that we've been getting at the library about the cuts that have been made at the federal level to IMLS. IMLS as the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And there is, I sent you a link. The library, Kitsap Regional Library, does have some information on our website. And thank you, Reed. I want to start by saying that I think it's 96% of our funding comes from property taxes. So that funding is secure and not impacted by the cuts to IMLS. We have used grants from IMLS in the past, and the letter that you see on your screen does review some of those grants, so you have an idea of what we do, but also the kind of programs that IMLS is. Some of the work that they do in terms of giving grants to public libraries around the country. The cuts to IMLS, while we're fortunate that most of our funding comes from property taxes and so will not be impacted, there are libraries at the state level and also public libraries around the country at the federal level that are feeling the impact. At the state level, we have the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, which has had severe cuts. They are no longer open to the public. They have slowed down their registration process. So they used to respond to requests for membership to that library very quickly, and they're no longer able to do that. They also know that the creation of new audio books through that library will be severely curtailed. Any phone calls will go to an answering machine, and they hope to answer them within the week. And that impacts the lives of so many people, members and those that love them. Washington Talking Book and Braille Library provides access to reading material, listening material that otherwise is not accessible to folks who don't have access to the written, printed word. So someone with low vision, someone with memory loss, someone without the dexterity to turn a page or the strength to hold a book. So that impact of the staff loss that they've had for that library is severe. The other Washington State impact that I'm aware of is that the research library for the Washington State Library has been closed. um, uh, closed to the public, pardon me, starting July 1st. They also, and I'm looking at some notes that I took earlier, they had an Ask a Librarian program. So if you had a research question related to the state of Washington, you could call or email and ask a research question or um, set up a meeting with a librarian to talk about your question. Those research appointments are no longer available. Any phone calls will go to voicemail, and like the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, they're hoping to be able to answer the phone within a week. They've also had to uh, discontinue subscriptions to some databases, and I went to the Secretary of State's webpage and the information there about Washington State Library. They said that the genealogy databases and acquisitions of new materials will be drastically limited. Um, so that is also a big impact. Now, um, there is there there is a positive in that our governor on May 19th signed a bill which will impose a $50 surcharge on all filings handled by Superior Court clerks. $20 of that total would go to the state office for library services. And that pot of money would generate up to $6 million in a full biennium. Now, right now, they're short 6.7 million, so it will not be a full refunding of that area, refunding of those libraries, but they are thinking ahead about how they can go about funding those and given all of those
So
cuts.
that's the research and genealogical things you were just talking about.
Correct. That's the Washington State Library's Research Division, as well as the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library. Now, the national impact of these cuts to the Institute for Museum and Library Services, they support over 125 libraries across the United States. They provide
125,000.
Oh, did I just say 125,000 libraries? Across the US, they provide funding for workforce development, digital access, early literacy, and community engagement programs. The Library Services and Technology Act, which is funded through the IMLS, is the only dedicated federal funding source for libraries. Now, if you have questions about that, the website that Reed shared, and I'm sure there'll be a link on YouTube underneath the video, the Kitsap Regional Library has included some additional resources for you, including, I believe there's a link there to the Secretary of State's, Washington Secretary of State's office in the library division there. So that is a question I have been getting frequently, and a good one. And as you can imagine, those cuts to IMLS are impacting libraries, and thus had a big impact at the American Library Association conference. This is an annual conference put on by the American Library Association. There were about 15,000 attendees this year, and they're representing libraries of all types. So not just public libraries, but research libraries, academic libraries, medical libraries, legal libraries, any kind of library. If you are an employee there or a librarian there, you are welcome.
Well, I can't think of anything that is more aligned with our founding as a country than the importance of public libraries, the idea that information should be available to all citizens.
That's right. Absolutely.
So this is a kind of a shocking place for the federal government. And not that there aren't other shocking places the federal government is taking cuts, but this has kind of a symbolic meaning to me beyond just the kind of difficulties we're going to face in ordinary activities like trying to do
Yeah.
our own ancestry checking. The
Hmm.
idea of being able to have somebody help you search the available records and information and help you answer questions is kind of foundational to our country, I think.
Absolutely. And alongside with what I feel the horror of these cuts, are the acceleration of book bans that are happening across the country, which also is, I believe, threatening to the democracy, certainly freedom of speech, freedom of information. And the Library Association, the American Library Association, does have a code of ethics that includes the right to the information that you are interested in. If you are interested in information, then you have a book. There is a process of deciding what books go into libraries, what books stay in libraries, regardless of your area, the area of focus for us being the public library. Um, so there was quite a bit of talk at the American Library Association conference. One of the first things that I attended was a screening of a documentary called The Librarians. And let me see, I have a few notes because I didn't want to forget everything. It was a busy, let's see, 5 days in Philadelphia. Um, it's an hour-long documentary, and it is going to be shown on PBS in the fall. I wasn't able to find a date, but it was created with I forget the division of PBS, but there's I think Independent Lens, that's what it is, PBS Independent Lens. So in the fall, we'll see that that will become available via PBS. This is not a happy movie. It's a documentary about the impact of the bans that are happening right now. It follows several librarians in different places in the United States that have had their items in their library, not only had libraries items in their library challenged, but they themselves have faced criminal charges and threats to their lives and the lives of their families. Um, they are, let's see, they're it really it was striking. I am not aware of any real challenges that have happened in Kitsap County. We do have a process for questioning an item that we have in our collection, but I am not aware of any explicit attempt. I believe there was one. Believe there was one in 2007, and that was a challenge. Don't quote me on the year, I'm not entirely sure, but I believe there was a challenge to a book that was in a middle school at that time. Um, but the threats that are being made to these librarians for having materials in the library that they have chosen to represent the users of their library and to support the users of their library is frightening, and I think it's something that we should be talking about. And speaking openly and talking about that, the intellectual freedom movement that we're experiencing, this idea that we shouldn't be able to have access to the materials that we want to have access to, um, need to have access to. And one, there was one person in the movie, a student actually, who pointed out that when you look back in history, those that have been involved in book banning efforts have never been remembered as the good guys. Never been remembered as the good guys. So that was the opening of the conference for me, and it set the tone. There were a number of workshops on um, how to work with traumatized staff. Um,
Yeah, I can hear it in your voice.
yeah. Uh, and it's not just the book banning. It is, people coming into the library and asking where their social security checks are.
Right.
Recognizing that there are federal programs that have been canceled that support the members of our society, members of our communities across the country, and knowing the harm that is going to cause over time is challenging. And one workshop I went to in particular was about debriefing after specific incidents. And that was, it was a program that was created in Canada, in Toronto, after a particularly horrifying incident when someone jumped from a fourth-story they had indoor stories of the library and they jumped in down and
Like
killed
down into an atrium or something.
Yes, thank
Oh
you.
my.
Yeah, and so they developed this program, which I would argue is helpful at any time because there have always been incidents in libraries that are challenging, but they are increasing. Um, One of the workshops I went to, it was entitled Free Expression in 2025, Challenges for Libraries. And this particular discussion, it was a panel discussion, had representatives from ALA, from the Freedom to Read Association, and from some university libraries. So there was a librarian from Harvard there, and was very clear that he was going to watch what he said and not get too political, but he did share that they are currently in his area working to digitize as much as they can so that students are not required to physically go into the building. So that if they don't feel safe, they can still do the work and the research that they need to do without putting themselves into danger, which really is horrifying.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think that you want a library to be one of the safer spaces
Right,
in our community.
right, right. And they're working hard to make things available as best they can. Um, Building bridges in divisive times, that was another one. Leading passionate, engaged staff through uncertain political times. There were two larger events that I really appreciated. One was with Gretchen Whitmer, who is the governor of Michigan and has had threats made to her life. And she's recently published a book, but she certainly has experienced the anti-intellectual freedom movement in her state and personally. The other person I was happy to hear from was Dr. Carla Hayden. She's our former Librarian of Congress. She was the first woman to be appointed Librarian of Congress and the first person of color to be the Librarian of Congress. And while boy, is she smart. I just was so very impressed with her, also her sense of humor. She had a discussion with Kwame Alexander, who is just a librarian, an author of books that are geared towards younger readers, YA, so teens. Fabulous. If you're looking for a good book that doesn't shy away from some of the issues of our time. Also, what a beautiful writer. If you really enjoy delving into a book because of the beauty of the art of writing, Kwame Alexander is a good choice. But I digress a little bit. Um, um, she did, the one comment that she made that towards, that hinted at really everything that has happened to her. I mean, she talked about how she found out that that she was being let go from the library, but she also referenced the announcement from the White House press secretary saying that she was removed because of her actions in DEI, as well as the placement in the library of inappropriate children's books. At which point the audience started to laugh. And she said, "That's right. The Librarian of Congress." Apparently, they don't know that I am a librarian that works for Congress. So
And maybe children's books is not what they intended to say. That our members of Congress read.
Yes, yes. And if there does happen to be a children's book on the shelves, it is because a member of Congress requested it. So, anyway, it was funny, and it felt a little bit like kind of an inside joke, but although yeah, why would the Librarian of Congress put something like that in the collection? Altogether, I will say it is it's a sobering time, and the conference reflected that. It even reflected it in the swag. There's a big marketplace where authors and publishers go to talk about their books, and different service providers. So, everything from copy machines to bookshelf builders to I mean, just anything
Right,
you can think of.
tools of the trade.
Tools of the trade, and they were giving away all kinds of bags. Librarians Fight Ignorance, banned book bag. So much of the material really referenced what we are going through professionally in this climate. And
Yeah, you did talk about hearing from the librarian from Harvard. Did
yeah.
you have occasion to talk to other librarians in communities that might not be quite so supportive as the one you work in?
I did get to talk to a librarian that had an item, had a challenge made in her library. She worked in a public library in Texas, a smaller public library. And she had been proactive in that she had identified a mentor who had already been through a process in where a book was challenged, so that when it occurred, she was able to reach out to that colleague, that mentor, to have someone guide her through the process, guide her through, when going for legal assistance, what to, questions to ask, things to, making sure that the lawyer understands our code of ethics, our the values of the library and intellectual freedom specifically. And she ended the librarian with whom I spoke, um, said that made all the difference. Having been proactive about talking to a colleague, putting a policy in place, and then reaching out at the time when it occurred, which was and this was, I forget the name of the workshop, but it was a workshop in which we were encouraged to talk to each other, which is the back and forth that I had with this person, but people were sharing their experiences and their responses. It was sobering.
Yeah, well,
And
and it's also, I guess, a little guidance that you can share with your colleagues about what things we might do here,
yep,
just because we don't know what the future will bring uh, in the near term, or how long the situation with funding and supportive libraries is going to go on. And of course, if there is at some point restoration of the funds, it's not going to turn itself back on overnight.
that's correct. That's absolutely right. And the services that our community provides outside of the library, which we support. and certainly the patrons that come into our library who use those services, and our similar mission to support, the library, as well as other organizations whose mission is to support our community members, to support each other, to work together.
Yeah, I mean, you talked earlier about having questions about where's my social security check.
Yep.
All kinds of questions come across the librarian's desk, if you will.
All kinds of questions, and you get a real peek into the concerns that people experience. There is a misunderstanding, I think, that certainly in Kitsap County, but there's a misunderstanding on Bainbridge Island, I think, that there are not people on this island that are heavy users of the kind of support services that we offer. Helpline, the library, the senior community center. I mean, there is this misunderstanding that there is no one here that needs a kind of support, and uh, and boy, that is just not accurate. We all
Yeah.
need support.
Yeah, well, and on the one hand, there's the sort of issues that are around limited income. And although we have a very high average income, that's because we have some very high earners. And we
Mhm.
also have a number of people here who are just scraping by. But the
Yeah.
other thing is that we all, regardless of our economic status, have questions that we need to have answers for that we don't
Mhm.
know about. You know, what are the options for Medicare? What
Mhm.
are the options? We mentioned Social Security, very common, uh,
Mhm.
element of for folks who are over 65 and 68 and 72, whatever. And then the other sort of thing are crises that come up, and you're just looking for somebody who might have a clue about what the next step is. So,
Right.
so I'm glad to hear that at least in terms of basic staffing and organization, that our library is funded by some regional money by our property taxes.
Yes. Yes.
But a lot of this infrastructure, the sort of like, we're learning about the importance of NOAA and the National Weather Service to services that we don't think about as tied to that. We think of the folks on TV as somehow getting their information about the weather on their own, but they're actually relying on federal dollars that are informing them. And the same is true for all this well, the talking book in Braille. As you know, thanks to you, my dad for many years was able to use that. And I know many folks in our community who appreciate the idea of getting audiobooks
Mhm.
easily delivered at no cost, and periodicals too. And to see that drop off is one of those things that not everybody will notice, but the people who will notice will be quite shaken.
That's right. And I think libraries are one of the things that I love about libraries is that they are truly a representation of the people. Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, we have all contribute. There are tax dollars that go towards that library, and we do that to support our community. The services are free, but when you receive them, but they're not cost free. We are contributing, and I do feel very fortunate that Kitsap Regional Library is supported by our property taxes, by the people in this community, and that we do value this library.
And
Whatever we can do to support our libraries across the country too.
yeah, well, I will note, if you're interested, you're listening to this and you want to find out more about the American Library Association, their website is ala.org. Um, Thanks for reporting in. I wish you had better news to share, but I'm glad that you were able to go and will be able to share what you heard with some of your colleagues in the Kitsap Regional Library System.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me, Reed.
You're welcome.